What can you do, what can't you do when it comes to self-defense with a firearm? Well, today on the show, we've got Matt Kilgo. He's a criminal defense attorney, and he works with U.S. Law Shield. He's going to be answering a lot of legal self-defense questions. This Gun Talk Nation is brought to you by SAUER, Ballistic Advantage, and Eotech Optics. Today on Gun Talk Nation, if you're listening to it, it may sound a little different. If you're watching it, it looks different. We are in our new offices, Range Ready Studios, and we've got Matt Kilgo.
That's right.
We were joking about the names earlier.
That's right. I've been called worse by a lot of people.
Matt, you work with U.S. Law Shield.
That's correct.
So this is going to be a little conversation about the legal side of self-defense with guns, right? So there's just so many areas to go into, and it's one of those areas I like to joke that when any of us here at Gun Talk go to a concealed carry class, we always come back with stories of people in the class asking the instructor, well, what if this? Well, what if that? I mean, you must get questions all the time. I mean, what are the top ones that come up?
I preface every conversation I have about that with, it depends. I tell folks there are a few things about lawyers you need to know. There's an old saying, good lawyers ain't cheap, cheap lawyers ain't good, and every good lawyer will start with, it depends. I get a lot of really interesting questions that end up with, well, my neighbor did this, or my boyfriend did this, right, or my convicted felon brother did this.
Oh, wow, yeah.
A lot of the questions that I have are general carry questions, questions about lawful stops. If you're stopped by a police officer, what do you say and what do you do?
Yeah.
That's really where people feel like they're going to have the most police interactions on the road. 99 out of 100 times, the vast majority of individuals only have encounters with law enforcement during a traffic stop.
Right.
So many gun owners want to know, well, what should I say? What does the law require me to say? And how do I get out of this situation without losing my gun rights or being arrested? And I tell folks, look, every situation is different. It depends.
Yeah.
Every state is different. My state is Georgia. In Georgia, we have no mandatory disclosure law.
Oh, okay.
So you don't have to tell a police officer you have a firearm in the car, and you don't have to automatically present a weapons carry license. Other states like Texas, Florida, may be different. I believe in Texas there is some requirement.
And in Louisiana there is a requirement. But if they said, are there any firearms in the car, obviously you'd have to answer that question.
Maybe.
It
depends. It depends. What I tell folks is say what I say. Officer, there is nothing in this car that will harm you. And if they continue to press, then it may be time for you to say, let's get my lawyer on the phone and talk about that. And then if you're a member of U.S. Law Shield, you can call your state attorney and go from there.
And obviously you work with them, and that's an interesting deal because people go, oh, it's like concealed carry insurance. Like, well, yes and no. It's not exactly. But the idea of, let me call my lawyer, and that everybody's heard that phrase, but you literally have a lawyer you can call.
That's true. So full disclosure, I don't sell it. I am what they call an independent program attorney.
Okay.
I am a member of the bar of the state of Georgia. I represent all of U.S. Law Shield's Georgia members, and any time a U.S. Law Shield member travels to Georgia, I also represent them.
Okay.
You can't fly from Houston to Dallas without flying through Atlanta.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
Everybody comes to Atlanta.
Yes.
And I get 10, 15, 20 questions a week from members who are not Georgia residents about carry in Georgia because everyone travels through Georgia. So my job is just to assist them by answering general questions, and then there is a 24-hour emergency number, and if you call that number, it rings directly to my cell phone.
Wow.
Or if you're a Louisiana resident, you call that number, it rings your Louisiana attorney's phone.
Okay, so all right, but people want to know, all right, but Matt, I have questions. What are, what if this happens, or can I do this, or whatever? I mean, what are the ones that you get most that we should answer for the listeners here?
Most often, I get questions about the reasonableness of the use of force. Is it okay for me to protect myself? And sometimes it may be an older gentleman who says, look, I don't move as fast as I used to. What if this gang of thugs sets upon me, right? Everything is reasonable. In the moment, was it reasonable for you to use force? Was the other person taller than you? Was he faster than you? Did he have bigger arms than you? Did he have a knife? These are all they seem like minor details, but they all move toward the question of whether or not it was reasonable for you in that moment to act. And it's not whether you think it's okay, or if I'm the bad guy, whether I think it's not okay for you to use force. It's whether a hypothetical third person, what we call a reasonable person, would have acted the way that you acted. There's no hard and fast rule, right? We say there's no bright line legal rule. Everything's a shade of gray. And the question becomes, in that moment, did sufficient facts exist for you to act as you did? And if they do, then you would be justified in the use of self-defense. And again, every state is different. Some states, like Texas, they have what is called a rebuttable presumption. The law, to a certain level, it presumes that you act reasonably.
Okay.
Other states don't have that. And in some states, you have to retreat before you can use force.
Duty to retreat.
Right.
Yeah, I think we should probably, my general thought about it is, you should err on the side of trying to do everything you can to get away from it, to not have to use force. So we're in South Louisiana, and we have gators in all of the...
There were 3 in the parking lot.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're like, do you have pet gator? Yeah, we have pet gators. Yeah, we eat gator. We ride them to work. But I had a guy who likes to kayak who didn't own a gun, and he's like, yeah, I want to get a pistol for when I'm kayaking. I was like, a pistol for when you're kayaking? He goes, yeah, I mean, I've had gators pretty close to me, and the gator thing is kind of like the bear thing in Alaska. You pretty much need to have like bite marks to be okay to shoot a gator or a bear in those places. Like, it's not like, oh, I saw a gator over there and I was scared and I shot him. And it's almost like, in a different way, it's like, okay, you can't have use of force because I was scared. That's, you'll say it depends. But,
right. Wow, and then wow, you really got me pegged.
There's cases when having to make a longer shot on a bad guy, 40 or 50 yards, you're like, dude, you're going to jail. You can't do that. And there's probably cases where you could argue that was totally justified.
I tell folks, and it's a little tongue-in-cheek, it depends on who you shot. Right? But it also depends on the police officer who responds to the scene. What you say to that police officer, which should be nothing. Say nothing.
All right, that's the answer to that question.
Right. I will only speak to my attorney. Doesn't matter what state you're in, you have the right to remain silent. That's guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights.
Some people will say, but you should say there's the evidence, you should make sure that evidence or witnesses aren't missed. And that's the counter argument that I've heard to, you should make sure that the officer there knows that those people saw what happened and this is evidence here or whatever.
So what I tell folks is do what you can in the moment to protect yourself. Once you protected yourself, call 911. Tell them who you are, where you are. Tell them you've been the victim of a crime. Ask them to send police assistance. As my grandmother would say, send an ambulance. Right? I grew up in Alabama. And then hang up the phone. Put the firearm in a place where everyone can see it, and then call your lawyer. Let your lawyer answer those questions for you.
Do you prefer, along the firearm, do you prefer them putting it somewhere where it's, or reholstering?
Clear the action, put it somewhere it can easily be seen.
Okay.
I've been in argument.
Not on your person?
Not necessarily on your person, because that's not a movement that you want to make in the presence of law enforcement officers.
Sure.
Especially officers who already know that a firearm has been used.
Sure.
They're going to be hyper aware. They don't necessarily know that you are the good guy. Now, if it's 3 a.m. and you're in your underwear, they're going to figure that out.
Right. Yeah.
But if it's out in a park, at a movie theater, going to the grocery store, they're only going to see gun equals bad because they know a firearm has been used and they want to make sure that everyone on the scene is safe. They'll figure it out at that point. But the best thing at that moment is follow their legal instructions and tell them your attorney's on the way. Because if you invoke your right to an attorney, that can't be used against you. A very common issue, people say, well, if I ask for an attorney, doesn't that make me look guilty? Well, who's going to find out? We go to court, and the prosecutor says, well, yeah, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this gentleman shot another man in cold blood. And then when the police showed up, and they said, what happened? He said, I want a lawyer. And if that were able to be brought in front of the jury would go, oh my God, he must have done it. if he's asking for a lawyer. That's why a jury can't even hear that you've invoked your right. They can never hear that.
Really?
Right. They can't know that you invoked your right. Your silence cannot be used against you.
Okay.
So if it can't be used against you, better to use it. Even police officers will tell you, just stay quiet and your lawyer will be here.
Yeah.
I always say it's the wiser course of action.
Going back to something you were kind of talking about is they don't know who the bad guy is sometimes. And
Right.
Yeah, like you said, if you're in your underwear and in your house, different deal perhaps, but don't make the assumption that, well, I'm the good guy, obviously, and they understand that. No, they don't understand that.
They don't. They don't. And police officers are put at a disadvantage in a situation like that because they are responding to a call for distress. Maybe they already know a firearm's been used, and police officers are human. They just want to go home to their families and not have any more holes than when they started the job that day.
Yeah.
So what they're going to do is protect everyone from the threat, and then they'll start to unravel the ball of string of facts.
If you really want to get to know the AR-15, you got to do a build. Yes, it's common, it's possible, and it's legal. So you can actually build your own AR-15, and one of the places to start is Ballistic Advantage, ballisticadvantage.com. They have all the stuff you need to do an AR build. And the cool thing is you can really customize it for what you want that gun to be. Do you want it to be a self-defense gun, a 3-gun, a hunting gun? There's a lot of different possibilities. So check out Ballistic Advantage for all your AR build needs. Ruger Firearms, you know them, you love them. They do a lot of different things. One of the ones that I like is the LCR. It's not a new gun, but it's really a cool, snubby revolver. It's very lightweight. It's very comfortable to shoot, even with hotter ammo. It has a nice little rubberized Hogue grip on it. They have a few different flavors and models there. But for a revolver that's easy to carry and conceal, check out the Ruger LCR. Are there, I mean, you've been doing this as a criminal defense attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Are there stories that we can kind of glean some lessons from of like, yeah, you've had these particular encounters and how it went down and how it turned out?
I can give you stories from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
One reason, for instance, that I tell folks, unless the law requires you to tell a police officer you have a firearm, don't do it. I used to work as a prosecutor in Atlanta, and not long after I left being a prosecutor, I was stopped by a motorcycle officer. You know, big tall boots, the cool hand Luke sunglasses, and he walks up to the car and says, "Sir, do you know how fast you were going?" Well, you don't have to answer that either. But I took my driver's license and my weapons carry license and held it outside the window. And he said to me, "Why are you handing me your weapons carry license?" I said, "There's a .45 in the center console, there's an ASP baton in the glove box, and there's a taser rattling around in the door. Why do you have so many weapons?" And that's when I say, "I used to work at the prosecutor's office." He goes, "Have a nice day."
That's why.
But even in my position as a prosecutor, and we had certain allowances for self-protection by law, by statute, and by policy, there's no requirement that you disclose these things. You know, if a police officer is stopping you to give you a traffic ticket, they don't need to know your life story.
Yeah.
All they need to know is that you will accept that citation, you will hire an attorney, maybe one in a red tie, who knows, and then you'll go to court. And a lot of my clients' stories I can't really get into too much, but one of the most important things people need to realize, and so many of my clients have said this, is, Matt, the reason I spoke to a police officer is because I felt like I'd done nothing wrong. Your subjective feelings have absolutely nothing to do with the law. And
It's kind of that I have nothing to hide.
Right, that's exactly right.
Right.
I have nothing to hide. I was in the right.
Yeah.
Maybe. It depends.
Yeah.
And if you start to talk, you may chip away at those absolute rights. I've had a lot of clients who have given statements to law enforcement officers and were arrested. I've had clients that I have assisted in giving statements to law enforcement officers who were arrested. One I'm thinking of in particular had bruises from the fight himself and was still arrested, ultimately prevailed in court, ultimately prevailed on an immunity defense.
Okay.
But that did not prevent him from being arrested, having to post a bond, hire an attorney, and go through 1.5 years of court.
We have some new wrinkles happening these days with constitutional carry or permitless carry, and a lot of differences going state to state to state.
Right.
I mean, what are you starting to see, and what are some of the issues that people need to be aware of?
Well, thankfully, there are a lot of folks who are aware of their rights now because so many states are doing a good job of broadcasting what constitutional or permitless carry means.
Mm-hmm.
There are currently 26 states out of the 50 that have some form of lack of permit, permitless carry, or true constitutional carry. Georgia, as a matter of fact, became I think the 25th state,
Yeah.
and then Indiana became the 26th state a month ago, and then 2 weeks later there was a man who foiled a mass shooting.
Yeah.
And this is a 22-year-old kid.
Didn't have a carry permit.
Didn't have a permit, was carrying lawfully, and what was it, 8 shots or 10 shots in 5 seconds?
8 hits.
And he
I
hit
think
the
is what
guy
they
8
said.
times from 40 yards away.
Pretty amazing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's got to have some trigger time on the range a lot, because that's really not an easy thing to do, especially under stress.
It's not an easy thing to do, especially under stress, even if you have experience, law enforcement experience, military experience. I think it's vital, as you guys know and understand why you built such a fabulous facility here. One of the most important things as a law-abiding gun owner you can do is know the law and train. Know the law and train.
Yeah.
But back to permitless carry. With 26 states now doing it, the rules aren't the same, even with permitless carry in every state.
It's not that simple.
It's not that simple. It depends. There are some states that only really provide permitless carry to individuals who live in that state. Now, Georgia's great. Georgia provides permitless carry to 4 types of individuals. If you have a license in Georgia, you don't need one anymore. You can carry permitless, and that means openly or concealed in most public locations and private locations. Private owners can still exclude you or eject you, and there are some places that are absolutely off limits: courthouses, mental health facilities. You can carry to the grocery store. You can carry to a movie theater. There are lots of places that you wouldn't think that you could carry that you can carry. Weapons carry license holders are okay. If you don't have a license but you're eligible for a license, you're okay too.
Okay.
If you're an out-of-state resident and have an out-of-state license, you're okay in Georgia. And if you live...
So that's kind of automatic reciprocity just
with everybody.
with everyone.
Now, Georgia has reciprocity, and that's one of the reasons, and I'm sure we'll talk later about some reasons to maintain your license, and I believe there are very important reasons to do it. But it does sort of provide automatic reciprocity for everyone. You have a license, come to Georgia, you're okay to carry.
Okay.
And then even if you don't have a license and you live out of state, you live in Louisiana, don't have a license, but you came to Georgia and you'd qualify if you lived in Georgia, you would be okay to carry permitless.
Covers pretty much most people who would be legal to carry.
Everyone but the bad guys. See, that's the thing about permitless carry. It does not grant any greater ability to carry for individuals who couldn't already carry.
Yeah.
It's important to understand and to note that you still have to be eligible for a weapons carry license, and this is where a lot of people get hung up. You can be eligible for to buy a firearm and not be eligible for a weapons carry license.
Right.
And there are a lot of folks in that gray area, and I still have to tell them, you can't carry permitless. There are certain places that you only can carry in these certain places.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. And everyone's permitless carry is a little different. Some will allow open carry, some only concealed, some both. The easiest way for me to describe it in the classes that I teach is to say, look, we're all in Georgia, right? And I'm an attorney in Georgia. Everybody likes to go to the beach. If you're a Georgia resident, you like to go to the beach, you're going to go North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, or Alabama. None of those states, except for Alabama, have permitless carry. And even then, Alabama's, I don't think, goes into effect until January of 2023.
They kind of really kicked the can down the road for enacting it.
They did.
So that's the argument for having a permit then?
Right, because you're going to go to the beach, you still need a weapons carry license if you're going to go to South Carolina. You still need a weapons carry license if you're going to go to Florida. That's one of the main arguments. It helps with NICS checks when you go to buy a firearm. In some states, this doesn't necessarily apply to, Alabama, for instance. But in Georgia, when you obtain a weapons carry license, the background check that you have to go through to get it meets and exceeds federal guidelines for the NICS check. So you present your weapons carry license, they don't have to put you through the background.
Right.
Is anything going to happen when you go through the background? Probably not, but why give the government an opportunity to mess that up?
See, and I'm the guy who said, lifetime carry permit sounds great. We'll pay it one time, done in Louisiana. And so every time they're like, oh, just give me a carry permit. I'm like, but it's a lifetime. You still have to run the NICS thing. And it's just...
And again, every state's a little bit different, but having that weapons carry license softens the landing. It helps to pave the way for that. One of the most important places one of the most important reasons I believe it's still necessary to have that weapons carry license is travel through school zones.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we have a federal Gun-Free School Zone Act. It was 1990, it was declared unconstitutional, and they reauthorized it from 1995. Local governments can change state law, for instance, and they can say, well, you no longer need a weapons carry license to travel through a school zone. So the Georgia General Assembly can change Georgia law, but they can't change federal law.
Yeah.
And the federal law says you have to fall into one of these exceptions in order to travel through the school zone. And the only exception that most of my listeners, most of my readers, most of my folks that I work with can fall under is possession of a weapons carry license from the state in which the school zone is located.
And if you have kids,
you
are most likely driving through a school zone to drop off and pick up and go to things, and you still can't carry into the school, right? But
well, depending on the state, I think Texas just passed the law that you can do that pretty much anywhere. I'll have to check that.
Well, and that's a good point of having to stay up on the federal and certainly your state laws, and it's your duty to educate yourself on this stuff.
Absolutely right.
Some people will say, well, the problem with unpermitted carry is now these people aren't getting trained. They're untrained people carrying. My thing has always been, at least in Louisiana, it's a one-day class that basically teaches you like the 4 rules of gun safety and the difference between a revolver and a semi-auto. Like it doesn't prepare you to carry, it doesn't prepare you for a self-defense encounter. I mean, what is your take on that?
Well, it's a false argument for my state because we don't have a class requirement.
Oh, okay.
Georgia never had one, which is one reason
if you fill out the paperwork and you qualify, you're done. You're good.
And again, that's one of the most important reasons that I still tell people to get their weapons carry license. Georgia is what we call a shall issue state. And as we've all been watching with Bruin and with the Supreme Court, there are only, I think, 6 states that are may issue, which are no longer may issue. The law requires the state to give you a license. That is your right. It's not regulatory, it's not permissive. It is a law that they're required to follow. Hold their feet to the fire, stand on your rights, get the license that they're required to give you. That's what I tell folks. It's one of the most important reasons. If you don't exercise that right, it withers and dies.
When you think of Sig Sauer, a lot of people think of pistols, and they make a lot of nice ones, the 226, 229s, obviously the P320, the P365. But what about rifles? Yeah, they make a lot of ARs, but they also have the Cross, which is a really modern bolt-action rifle. Could be used for just accuracy target shooting, but obviously can be used for hunting and backcountry hunting, really, because it's lightweight, has a foldable stock, comes in a lot of different calibers. So if you want something maybe a little bit different, check out the Sig Sauer Cross rifle. There's a reason Eotech optics have been around and popular for so long. And let's go back to the OG. They're holographic weapon sights. These are what we would all call red dot, but it's different technology. And there's some advantages to that. With one of the things that I like is the Eotech Reticle. I call it the Eotech Reticle. It's got a big circle with a little dot in the middle. So you have the quick shooting to find that big reticle, the big circle, but you can be really precise with that small 1 MOA dot right in the middle. And this is stuff that's been trusted by law enforcement and military for years and years. They're still making them and they're still really good. And it's something you could think about putting on a carbine type gun. So check out Eotech Optics. So as we're wrapping up here, Matt, I mean, what are some other little, if you have a buddy who is carrying or thinking about carrying and they're like, well, you deal with legal defense issues, this and that. I mean, are there a top 3, top 2, top 4, like do this, don't do this?
Yep, and believe it or not, the first thing I'll tell you is if you carry every day, make sure all the lights on your car work. Make sure you don't have any busted tag lights, no busted tail lights. Don't give the police a reason to put you in a position where you have to decide what to tell them.
Yeah.
Just go around once a week, once every 2 weeks, and make sure your tag lights work. Make sure that you put the the sticker on your tag. Make sure your emissions are up to date. Little things like that to tell them that, you know, your attention to detail is okay. They don't need to stop you, and you don't have to put yourself in that position.
And obviously, the vast majority of people who carry are law-abiding citizens.
Yes.
But it's a good point, and kind of extending that out of like, you know, speeding and whatever else. Don't, you know, be extra law-abiding.
Well, this is the second point that I would tell you, and maybe this is the most important point. If you are a law-abiding gun owner and you carry a firearm every day, you have to be the adult in every situation you find yourself. You have to be the one to walk away. That firearm does not embolden you to have a larger opinion or a louder opinion than any other person. You have to be the one that makes the attempt. Now, you talked about it a little bit earlier. You're going to do everything you can to get out of having to use your firearm.
Right.
Sometimes you can't. You're sitting in the back of the auditorium. The guy comes in the front, and that's the only way out. You're going to have to do what you have to in the moment to protect yourself and your family. But in every situation that's possible, be the bigger person. Be the one who understands that you have more to lose by engaging than by walking away.
Apologize, buy him a beer, do what you got to do.
Or you know what?
Accept
the bird, accept the one-fingered salute.
Yeah.
And don't return it and move on.
Yeah.
You've got to be the bigger person. That's the reason that we are law-abiding gun owners, because we understand that we have the power of life and death, and we should only use it in the event to prevent our death or the death of another person.
Good advice. Thanks for being with us, man.
Hey, this is great. Love this place.
Yeah, and this is U.S. Law Shield. It's legal services for people who carry guns.
Right. They call it legal defense for self-defense.
There you go.
In every state, it's different. In some states, it's insurance. In other states, it's not. What I tell folks, and again, I don't sell it, what I tell folks is, if you go to the length of getting firearm training, trying out a bunch of handguns before you find one that's the best fit for you, and then training with that firearm to protect yourself, protection doesn't stop at the moment that you use that firearm. It's only just begun. So protect yourself after you've protected yourself, and talk to U.S. Law Shield.
There's a longer battle ahead of that short little battle you just had.
Absolutely. It's only just begun in some cases.
Wow. All right. So there you go. It's your duty to keep trained up. It's your duty to be familiar with the legal side in your state, everywhere you go. That's it for us. We'll see you next time on Gun Talk Nation.